Well, after years of waffling and self-serving verbiage, Malcolm Turnbull has finally said 10 words actually worth listening to. The 10 words came halfway through a speech he gave to the Australia Institute the other evening. Sadly, the other 1,700 words, including snide swipes at scary old Sky After Dark, oops, that's us. Sadly, the other 1,700 words were not worth the podium they were uttered from, but still, 10 worthwhile words out of 1,700 ain't bad for our former Prime Minister, might even be a first. Those 10 words, uttered about climate change, of course, were, quote, "We have to replace ideology and idiocy with engineering and economics." Hallelujah. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, particularly when it comes to our current energy and environment policies, which are hurtling us towards European-style blackouts and soaring electricity bills with no end in sight. So yes, Malcolm, you are correct. We have to replace, as a matter of urgency in my opinion, the ideology of the climate change cult to which you belong and the idiocy of the renewable energy push, and replace them with, yes, sound engineering. That would be nuclear power, coal, gas, and reliable economics. That would be, of course, an end to the crippling subsidies to renewables and removing all impediments, including green and red tape, so as to allow the free market in energy to function properly, providing all Australians with cheap, reliable and abundant energy well into the future. Sadly, Mr Turnbull wants us to go the other way. His solution is more renewables and more green idiocy and more ideology, I guess. Sadly, as has been the case throughout most of his career, Mr Turnbull sometimes gets the diagnosis of the problem correct, but he offers up entirely the wrong solution. Pluck an example. For example, in 2014, Mr Turnbull was correct to point out that 30 bad news polls in a row was not a good look for the Abbott government. The one and only obvious solution to such a problem was for the entire cabinet to get fully behind their Prime Minister Abbott and support him to the hilt, to actively offer an overwhelming show of unity behind their leader and his policies, and to put all their individual energy into pointing out to the electorate how vastly superior the Abbott government was to the ones that preceded it, Rudd and Gillard. But instead, Mr Turnbull believed the solution to 30 bad news polls was to undermine his leader, to mock things like irrelevant things like raw onions or winking during a radio interview, to encourage disloyalty and disunity among his cabinet colleagues, to sweet-talk the supposedly loyal deputy leader of the Liberal Party into betraying her own leader, and then to install himself, Malcolm Turnbull, as the Prime Minister. The result of which was 14 lost seats at the following election and even more than 30 bad news polls in a row for Malcolm Turnbull, Prime Minister, before he too had to be dumped. Great at diagnosing the problem, not so good at the solution there, Malcolm. But I digress. Back to Malcolm's speech from the other evening. There is very good news in the speech for Peter Dutton, and that is because Turnbull claims that Peter Dutton is unelectable. Now, Mr Turnbull's political acumen is about as good as my nude mud wrestling acumen. So Peter Dutton should be cracking open the bubbly tonight, because it's London to a brick that Peter Dutton will be elected in a landslide at the next election following Mr Turnbull's verdict that he is unelectable. My advice to Peter Dutton is to rapidly ditch all vestiges of Turnbullism and return the Liberal Party to its anti-collectivist, anti-socialist, anti-Labor, anti-Greens roots. It's clear from the last election that the truly unelectable Liberals are those who try and out-teal the teals. That's a recipe for disaster. Think Dave Sharma, Tim Wilson, Trent Zimmerman, the list goes on and on. Over the next 18 months, we are going to see, both in Europe, where they are already knocking down wind turbines to get to the coal underneath, and back here, where we are destroying the energy market that has served us so well, that renewables and green hydrogen are a Fabian fantasy that only benefits wealthy renewables investors and punishes the poorest and most vulnerable in our communities with higher taxes and higher prices and higher bills. Australia is blessed with abundant amounts of coal, gas and uranium. We could have the cheapest and most reliable energy on the planet if our governments stopped demonising these amazing gifts, stopped interfering in our energy markets, stopped driving investment away with climate change, doom-mongering hyperbole, stopped tampering with the market. What we have now is not capitalism, it is crony capitalism, a grotesque marriage of political and ideological vested interests fused with wealthy speculators betting the house on making a fortune out of the renewables you subsidise. In what genuine free market does a billionaire buy up a perfectly sound coal-fired power plant just to shut it down? Here's Mr. Turnbull's idea from his speech for your future energy supplies. Quote, "You know, when there's lots of solar and wind, energy is cheap. You pump the water at the top of the hill. When the sun goes down, the wind drops, you open the gate valve. The water comes down and you're generating electricity." Australia, if you think that's the pathway to future success and prosperity, I've got a harbourside mansion to sell you.